Welcome to Isaiah Meandering, Rebels Speak, and today we're looking at chapter 14. We are meandering. If meandering is a slow walk, we're doing that. But I'm very much enjoying it, just thinking through all that God is seeing in the book of Isaiah, all that God's promising, how God is able to keep God's eye, God's mind, God's heart on so many different components. And we are in the two-nation world of Israel, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. And Isaiah is speaking to the southern kingdom. And Assyria is the dominant power, the dominant player. But in 100 years after this, Isaiah is looking into the future, and he's talking about Babylon and how more powerful, differently powerful. I think it's fair to say Assyria and Babylon are differently powerful. So Assyria rises to power and demolishes the northern kingdom of Israel. And then later down the road, Babylon's going to rise to power. And there's a lot about Babylon that seduces. It's a very seductive. The way it gets in and the way it erodes and corrodes values is real. So I'm going to just start with the ending. So God... through Isaiah, God's telling the story that he's saying to the children of Israel, you're not going to disappear. The trunk, at one point we saw an image of the trunk, the tree's completely cut down, and out of that trunk comes new life. And then we see God say to Assyria, look at Assyria, I will use you, but your pride and arrogance is going to be brought down low. Okay, your haughtiness, your pride, your arrogance are going to be brought down low. And then in chapter 13, God's speaking to Babylon, way out, like you too, Babylon, you're going to exert yourself and you're going to become a violent, right, power-obsessed nation. And I will deal with you, because God doesn't let the powers of this world destroy human worth unchecked. Like, you get to behave badly. It's true. We see a world where people behave very badly. But God ultimately brings an end to those bad behaviors. And I quoted that U2 song from when I was young about kingdoms rise and kingdoms fall, but God's love goes on and on. God's not stopped by human hatred, but God also doesn't allow human hatred to behave unchecked, or it gets to a certain level of power and it crumbles. Its own arrogance pulls the carpet out from under it. So Babylon's days are numbered. Its time of destruction will soon arrive. And this is prophetically, Isaiah is prophetically speaking into a future that's not here yet. And I'm gonna start. This is called chapter 14. We often see this as a lens of Satan, and it's not that it can't be a lens of Satan. I think pride has a way it functions that is consistent. There's scripture in Ezekiel talking about the king of Tyre. Like, no, people fall in love with their own power, and it's consistent what happens to their soul and their personality, however you want to see that. But today we're looking at Isaiah speaking into the future of this king of Babylon who's been so powerful, and he will be mocked. He will be mocked by God himself through Isaiah. But the Lord will have mercy on the descendants of Jacob. Okay, so Babylon's been given power in the future, and it will be destructive, and God will have mercy on his children. Jacob. Israel will be his special people once again. It's very important that we see God throughout this book affirming his love and special relationship with the people that have repeatedly not only defied God, but behaved in a way that was full of hate and oppression, in a way that God cannot and will not tolerate. It's not okay. It's not okay to say, I'm with God, but I abuse people. It's not okay to say, I love God, and then curse someone when you're driving. It's not okay. We're held to a very high account. So anyway, God is saying to Israel and Jacob, you're gonna see some really hard times, but I'm going to always be for you. I'm not just this strict disciplinarian that comes in and is like, I'm done with you. I'm done with you. There's scripture that feels like that, but the word is constantly no. Our relationship is deeper than that. It's deeper. God is inviting you into a deep relationship. A deep relationship. God doesn't abandon you the moment you behave in a way God doesn't like. Scripture clearly gives witness to that. New Testament and Old Testament. He will bring them back to settle once again in their own land. And then we're going to see the whole world kind of celebrating this. Like there's this vision in God's mind for Israel is such a small little country in the midst of a vast world. And there's a way that you could say that in Genesis 6, God was exhausted with human sin. And then after Noah, he sees Noah, he saves Noah, Noah's family. Then God sees something in Abram and his father that God reaches out and says, like, I want to have a relationship with you. God yearns for a relationship with God's human creation. God yearns for that. But there's been so much resistance. It's exhausting. Any one of us who's loved unlovely people, seriously difficult people to love, understand. And you need to know God understands. Where you're exhausted and you're not sure, tough love, what an easy thing to say. What does that look like in this situation? God is willing to help you and show you. God knows a lot about tough love. God knows a lot about gentle love. God knows a lot about love that forgives 77 times 7 times, but also draws a line some of those times and says, no, you're going to reap what you've sown. You're going to reap what you've sown. He will bring them back to settle once again in their own land. And people from many, you're going to reap what you've sown in order to find me better, to know me. You're going to reap what you sow right now in order for salvation to stick in your heart. That's really the story. And people from many nations will come and join them there and become a part of the people of Israel. There's this beautiful invitation, the house of Jacob. It's going, those words don't, to God, Jacob and Israel are one. He just gets a new name, but it's not the only name. There's a fondness for Jacob, there's a fondness for Israel. It's the same person. Scripture is very comfortable working towards those two. There's a fondness for Jacob, who becomes Israel. There's a fondness for Israel, who is Jacob. The nations of the world will help the Lord's people to return. Wow. The people that have defied you for so long are going to be on your side. They're going to help you. And those who come to live in their land will serve them. And gosh, that language is so, I don't know, it's tricky. They don't have a vision for a serviceless world. And you're going to be honored. It's speaking of honor here. It's not speaking of servitude. The point here isn't the service, it's the honor. You will be honored. Those who captured Israel will be captured. Okay, so Assyria's captured Israel, the northern kingdom, Babylon's the southern kingdom. Those who captured Israel will be captured, and Israel will rule over its enemies. It's not going to be this upside down world where you're forever seduced by great powers that are greater than you. There's going to be a day when you're going to be in your rightful place. And the world, there's going to be an order. There's this understanding throughout the whole of the Old Testament that when things are right, they're in the right order. Right order and all's well. Okay? Some of us like the concept of order. Some of us might get claustrophobic from the concept of order. But the Old Testament is saying that there's a way that when things are rightly ordered, rightly established, everything's well for everyone. And we don't have to share all the points that Scripture thinks are what that order looks like. But we want to be able to hear. Our ears want to hear from Scripture well, that we can see the deeper points of salvation that Scripture is speaking of. Okay, I'm going to read from verse 3. In that wonderful day when the Lord gives his people rest from sorrow and fear. What is that wonderful day? That wonderful day is when those who captured Israel will be captured and Israel will rule over its enemies. It will not be the tail. That's another image from the Old Testament. It will be in a place of leadership. And it can show the world God's original design, what righteousness really looks like. What does it mean to be a people that rule well? What does that look like? The Lord gives his people rest from sorrow and fear. I just hear these beautiful words. This is God's heart. God's heart is not destruction. God's heart is not beating people up. God calls it at one point the strange ways. He talks about how he's learned the strange ways of humanity. Okay, violence I don't think is natural to God. I mean, I genuinely don't. I think I kind of wonder if God learned violence from humanity. I don't know where he would have seen it before. In that wonderful day when the Lord Yahweh gives his people rest from sorrow and fear, from slavery and chains. Wow, slavery. Just a lot more aware of how rampant throughout the world, right? Throughout the world, oppression is. Throughout the world. Throughout the world. Humans that are put in horrible situations. Okay. From slavery and the chains. Slavery requires chains. You will taunt, you will tease the king of Babylon who's behaved so badly. The people are being released from the sorrow that they've known under the king of Babylon. They're being released from the fear they've known under the king of Babylon. They're being released from the slavery they've experienced under the king of Babylon and the chains that chained them. Release. They're being released from the king of Babylon. And so you, Israel, will now taunt this king. You will say, the mighty man has been destroyed. Yes, your insolence, that's that prideful rebellion. Your insolence, where you think you're above every other thing. When a nation behaves insolently, when a king behaves insolent, when a president is insolent, this is a bad. When you have no fear of the Lord, you easily become insolent. Your insolence is ended, for the Lord Yahweh has crushed your wicked power and broken your evil rule. These global powers that behave badly need Yahweh himself to step in and say, no, I'm breaking the very stick with which you're beating these people. I'm breaking it myself. I'm breaking it. It's not going on. It's not going forward. It's not. You're bullying. God, am breaking. I am breaking the stick with which you are beating my people, my creation. You persecuted the people with unceasing blows of rage and held the nations in your angry grip. There's a way that you have treated creation, and it's not okay. We are meant to have, this is that healthy fear of the Lord. How is my temper behaving? How am I treating people? I just feel to say that. How are you treating people when you drive? How are you speaking about people? These things add up. They matter. What we bless is blessed, and what we curse is cursed. Our words, our mouths, our heart attitude has power to it. And here's one with unimaginable power. And God's saying, no, your evil blows, your unceasing blows of rage. Think about that. There's something in this nation that has just forever oppressed and used violence to get the ends that it wanted, using violence to get what it wants. Held the nations in your angry grip. Your tyranny was unrestrained. Unrestrained tyranny. God sees it. But at last the land is at rest and is quiet. Finally, it can sing again. We've seen this several times in Isaiah. A sign of life, a sign of joy, a sign of hope is the singing of people. There's something about our songs that are great. Ooh. Finally, the earth can sing again. The land can sing again. This idea of nature itself being held hostage by the violence of the nations living on that land. This is visible in the book of Isaiah. Even the trees of the forest, the cypress trees and the cedars of Lebanon, these are the most beautiful trees. They were being cut down for profit, and now they're going to sing. They sing out this joyous song. Your power is broken. I want you to picture trees singing to the bullies in the land. Your power is broken. No one will come to cut us down now. See, they were just being sold off. They had no value, no worth. There was no celebration. They were a means to an end. And the one that's been destroying them, that king of Babylon, the trees are singing. No one will come to cut us down now. Okay. In the place of the dead, there is excitement over your arrival. Okay, the Sheol now is going to be everything about your ruin is bringing joy in a way that's poetic and odd and true, like good riddance. Think about that word, like it's good to be rid of you. Good riddance. It's good to be rid of you. In the place of the dead, there's excitement over your arrival. World leaders and mighty kings long dead, those that were in the position you're in now but died long ago and have sat there in nothingness. Once you're dead, you're about nothing. What's your legacy? What have you affected? What have you improved? How is the world better because of you? How is it worse because of your leadership? World leaders and mighty kings long dead are there to see you. You, like everyone before you, in the end are just nothing. All your pride, nothing. With one voice they cry out, now you are as weak as we are. This is death. I want you to see this. This is Sheol. This is it. This is it in the end. You're as weak as anyone. In the end, all your might, all your power, it's to nothing. Your might and power are gone. They were buried with you. All the pleasant music in your palace has ceased. Now maggots are your sheets and worms your blanket. Your body's going to be eaten like everybody else's body. Earth to earth. How you are fallen from heaven. Okay, this is talking about the morning star Venus and how it kind of rises to this brightness that kind of contends with the sun itself. And then it falls, like it's getting brighter, and then it's no longer bright that way. And it's saying this about world leaders. It's saying this about human power. It's saying this specifically about the king of Babylon. How you are fallen from heaven, O shining star, son of the morning. You have been thrown down to the earth, you who destroyed the nations of the world. You were all that. You were all that, and yet you're not. And I want to talk about like age, right? Age levels us. We can think we're all that. And in our old age, we're just older people who once were, right? Like, once I was this thing. Sorry, I got lost. You have been thrown down to the earth, you who destroyed the nations of the world, for you said to yourself, here is how sin falls in love with itself. I will ascend to heaven and set my throne above God's star. So it's using that image of Venus getting brighter than the morning star, seeming like it's going to be brighter than the sun, right? It's there before the sun has arisen. I will preside on the mountain of the gods, little g gods, far away in the north. Okay, I'm going to be up there. I'm going to be above all the powers that be. I'm going to be the highest power. This falling in love and believing it. I will climb to the highest heavens and be like the Most High. There's something that God is saying, you thought you were greater than me, and you believed it, and you've lived like it. You've lived like your life is more important than what I've spoken. You've lived like it. But instead, here's the truth. But instead, you will be brought down to the place of the dead, Sheol, down to its lowest depths. You will rot. You will be, Everyone there will stare at you and ask, can this be the one who shook the earth and the kingdoms of the world? Is this the one who destroyed the world and made it into a wilderness? You destroyed that which was good. Think about that. When our actions destroy that which is good because of our own self-love, and turn, I just want to say that. Like, what are you doing with what you've inherited that's good? Is your behavior, are your actions destroying the goodness that you've built, the goodness of your inheritance that you've used to build up your life? Are you passing that on? Or are you giving your children and grandchildren more wilderness than you actually inherited? You know, there's a way that our lives can chew through the true morality. I'm not talking about behaviorism. I'm talking about things that allow us to flourish in this life. And then we have a modicum, an amount of health. And then we don't live in accordance with things that create health. And we pass on to our children and grandchildren a recklessness that's not good for them. And there's something about the way this king has led that's destroyed. It's burned through righteousness, if you will. It's burned through health and turned. You've destroyed the world and made it into a wilderness. Is this the king who demolished the world's greatest cities? There were cities where people were living, having good lives, and you just came in and destroyed them. And they have no more livelihood. You did that. And God saw you do that. You went into towns that were working fine, and you let them be destroyed. Something about the way you ruled has demolished cities, has demolished nations. God saw it. You, and now all these dead leaders are saying, wow, are you the one that wrought havoc, right? I might not be saying that right. Brought havoc, I'll say that. Brought chaos to places where there was life. Is that the legacy of your leadership? I feel like that could even be something we could ask ourselves about how we lead at work or in an office or in a school. You know, what's that expression? Are we leaving it better than the way we found it? This king, no. Okay. Is this the king who demolished the world's greatest cities and had no mercy on his prisoners? That was a choice he made. And I feel like saying this. Where are places that you do not have mercy? What are conversations that you're not willing to have mercy on people? Be very careful. Be careful where you draw lines that you're like, no, you're beyond my mercy. Be very careful, because God is very merciful, very slow to anger, very. The kings of the nations lie in stately glory in their tombs, but you're not. They're buried well. This isn't going to be true for this king. You'll be thrown out of your grave like a worthless branch, like a corpse trampled underfoot. You will not know honor. Okay, honor is super important in this culture that we're talking to, the value system. You will be dumped into a mass grave with those killed in battle. So we nameless. You will be nameless. And you see no name is mentioned here. This is something Scripture likes to do. Whoever this king is, not to be named, not out of fear, out of no honor to you. Like a corpse trampled underfoot, you will be dumped into a mass grave with those killed in battle. You will descend to the pit. You will not be given a proper burial, for you have destroyed your nation. See how this is going to turn around here? You've not only destroyed other nations, as you were violent and destructive, you destroyed your own nation and slaughtered your own people. A leader should not be someone who destroys the livelihood of the people that live under that leader. You destroyed your nation and slaughtered your people. Your son will not succeed you as king. There's so much in here. It's so worth, it's fine to read this and apply it to Lucifer, which I think is often how Christians hear this, but I think it's very important that we read this and apply it to leaders and powerful leaders, people in positions of power who are reckless with their power and don't mind in their love of power what they destroy, in their wake. Like when a boat moves through the water, then you can look back and you can see where the boat has been. What's been left behind by the leadership of a person? God's taking that on. How you've treated other nations, how you've treated your own nation. Who have you been? Because if you've demolished and set destruction in motion, it will not be good. There will be no legacy for you. You will have no legacy. Whew. This is what the Lord Almighty says. I myself have risen against him. I will destroy his children and his children's children. They will never sit on his throne. I will make Babylon into a desolate land, a place of porcupines filled with swamps and marshes. I will sweep the land from the broom of destruction. With the broom of destruction, I, the Lord Almighty, have spoken. Okay, so what once looked very civilized will have no more civilization in it. And then it's interesting because this is where this book of Isaiah hops around. These next 4 verses are speaking to Assyria, the power that is right now. So there's a speaking into the future, into Babylon and into all the destruction, all the power Babylon will exert. But now we're speaking to the Assyria, the power in play right now. As Isaiah is speaking, the Lord Almighty, the power that we saw just a few chapters ago, be told, you're gonna to the end that you've behaved terribly to others, you will know terrible behavior. The Lord Almighty has sworn this oath. It will all happen as I have planned. It will come about according to my purposes. I will break the Assyrians when they are in Israel. I will trample them on my mountains. My people will no longer be their slaves. So there's something in this book that's putting these two spoken words of Isaiah back to back. This is how God deals with power that destroys. It's not good for you. Kingdoms rise and kingdoms fall. They're brought to an end, but God's love goes on. I have a plan for the whole earth. Okay, Assyrians, I will break the Assyrians when they are in Israel. I will trample them on my mountains. My people will no longer be their slaves. You thought it was okay with me to enslave my people. And my people have reaped some of what they've sown, because it was the unrighteousness of the people, the Israelites putting brothers and sisters into slavery when they're not supposed to. That's part of the whole problem in this storyline. But here God says, no, I'm going to trample. My people will no longer be your slaves. I have a plan for the whole earth, for my mighty power reaches throughout the world. It's like when God says, my arm's not too short to save. God is full of thought for redemption of the whole earth. The Lord Almighty has spoken. Who can change his plans? When his hand moves, who can stop him? And so later this week, we're going to look at some more ways that Isaiah is used to speak to other nations who are pretending to be deaf to God. God doesn't believe people are deaf. God believes that creation gives witness to God. And when you fall in love with yourself and you value yourself above others, a price will be paid. A price will be paid when you're cruel and you don't even see in a fellow brother and sister, fellow humanity. You don't see a sibling humanity. You don't see, like when Adam said to Eve, flesh of my own flesh. You don't see a person. You don't ever think about, right? You don't think about it. You never say, wow, how would I like to be treated? Am I treating people the way I'd like to be treated? We'll see that, right? That understanding, like that's the best lens to lead from. That's the best lens to lead from. How are my actions affecting others? And just all this to say, it matters to God. It matters to God. All right, God bless you.